Here this afternoon, I want to introduce to you Dr.Remica Binqham-Risher.
You just call me Remica.
Dr. Risher, or Remica,
Yes, please.
is a native of Arizona, an alumnus of ODU and Bennington College in Vermont. She's also an ODU professor and a Norfolk resident. So we're happy to forge connections in our community. We've had several important months recently: February, Black History Month; March, Women's History Month; and this month is National Poetry Month. Woohoo, yeah. And we want to acknowledge all of those, and we're lucky enough to do that with Remica. She's the author of 5 published books, one of which, her most recent one, Room Swept Home, has recently won an award and been nominated for 2 others. So we are so lucky that we organized this before the awards came out. I'm not sure she would have time for us otherwise. She's been published in the New York Times, the Writers Chronicle, New Letters, Callaloo, and Essence. She's a Cave Canem Fellow, which was founded in 1996, and cultivates artists and professional growth for specifically Black poets. She is also an Afro-Latin poet, which is an organization founded in 1991 and is the oldest continually running, predominantly African-American writing group in the country. Okay? Lots of reasons we are pleased to have her with us today. And so she will read us some poems from Room Swept Home. I know Ms. Bowler prepped some of her 6th graders to ask some questions, and I think those questions might inspire other questions in addition to the poems that she will read to us. So thank you very much for being with us today, and we pass you the mic.
Thank you. All right, so I have way too much stuff in my hand, so we're going to just move some stuff around first. Oh, you can. Other books. Hey guys. I appreciate y'all hanging out. Real short. You know how they don't think about how short you are, and now I can't reach down to the floor for my water? That's all right. Thank you, Ms. Moreland. So, really quickly, I really have to thank Ms. Moreland, because when I was in the 7th grade, nobody was teaching poems. I definitely didn't get to meet any authors until I was in college, probably. And my poems were still really, really bad by the time I got to college, probably because I didn't know that there were like people in my community who were doing this work. So thank you so much for introducing your students to poets. Let's talk about some of these poems. And if you have questions for me, of course, you can jump in at any time, but I'll read a few to give you some idea of some of the work that we're doing, and then we'll just talk. So Room Swept Home, the book that came out last year, most recently, is a book about my grandmothers. I realized very early on that family was going to be something I kept going back to in my writing life. Sometimes I write about the personal as well, that interest here too. This is also a book of like photographs and family history, so there's all kinds of stuff here beyond just stories about my grandmother. But I realized that history sometimes happens in your own backyard, and that's what happened with my grandmothers. One of my grandmothers, my 3rd great grandmother on my father's side, turns out she was interviewed for the WPA slave narratives. So she was born enslaved in 1859, and near the end of her life, there was a project that was started by the government. They were thinking, hey, all these people who had this experience, they're in their 70s, their 80s, they're gonna die off soon, so we need to make sure that we capture their stories. And so she had one of those stories where she's telling all kinds of stuff. And then another grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Mary Knight, was on the other end of her life. She was 18 when she had her first baby, which is really young to me. 18 when she had her first baby. She was married She was struggling with postpartum depression, which is something we all hear about a lot now. But back in the 40s, no one knew what it was, so they sent her to Central Lunatic Asylum up in Petersburg in 1941 after she had her baby, because they weren't sure what was going on with her. And so those grandmothers were within 1 mile of each other. And when I found out about those coincidences, I'm a poet, I'm real nosy, so I had to ask my family a bunch of questions and write it down. So I'm going to read some of those poems. All right, I'm going to take you to one of this poem. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'll start by reading some poems in their voices, because when you're writing other people's stories, I think it's important to try to get some of the things down that maybe they wouldn't have been able to get down themselves. When I started doing this research, I was in lots and lots of libraries, just trying to figure out what the history actually was versus, what my family knew. And it's strange, once you start looking for like the birth dates of people who were enslaved, of slaves, all of the birth dates are the same. It's all Christmas or New Year's. So you figure out really quickly that can't be right? It was just something that, it was an easy shorthand on the plantation. So I thought, if my grandmother got to tell her story, she would probably start at the beginning and tell what her real birth story was. So this is birth story. I wasn't born on Christmas, though this is what some folks will tell you. Some folks say everyone born slave was born on Christmas or New Year's Day. Some folks always lying. Some pretend we don't know how we got here or when, but I am made of memory and the impossible long hour. I cherish every part that was mine or my mother's, and she'd tell you too. I came in the world with the sun bearing its full heat, the day as steady as the pain. She swept through the pallet of hay on the floor. The dirt and rocks felt like coals underneath her. A friend there, rooted, a woman I'd called aunt for years, gray-headed and firm, had a guiding hand the children knew to follow, pressed on the belly, held mother's hips in place, helped her stand when laying down wouldn't move me, found grease to ease me out with the water and blood. And I remember what my mother said the woman told me, God brought you here. God made you free. Jesus was born outdoors on a night when the shepherds slept in the field, free from frost, no snow. Christmas wasn't his day either, but someone, somewhere, saw fit to give him what they thought he deserved, what suited them. Save the truth for later. I hope your teachers are paying attention. You all get A's for that clapping. Just kidding. I can't even wait grades, I'm sorry. But I appreciate you. I think, some of the fun of writing poems in people's voices is you get to imagine what they might have thought and heard and felt. And some of that is the exciting part of being a poet. You don't have to live only in your own experiences. You can experience things from the viewpoint of others too. I'm going to switch gears and read a poem in the voice of my other grandmother, in the voice of Mary, and then we'll talk a little bit. And we certainly do not just have to talk about these poems. I hope some of you guys are artists and thinking about, what your life would be like well beyond here. I hope some of you are writers. So we can just talk about that. I've been writing since middle school. I'll tell you exactly, how I cut a path to this place. So hopefully you'll see some of your books in the library and in the stores too. All right, so I'm going to read this poem about Mary, but really it's about her children. So Mary is my mom's mom. She was sent to the asylum with her oldest child. She ended up having 7 children. She lived a long life and was well after she was able to leave the asylum. And so what happens, sometimes with family history is one thing happens to somebody, but everybody in the neighborhood knows it. So it really happens to you and your children and your grandchildren and all those people too, right? It's kind of the way things work sometimes. And so this is June 18th, 1941 is the title of the poem. And that's the day that she gave birth, and also kind of a day that lived on that people talked about in the neighborhood for a long time. June 18th, 1941. The clothes are on fire in her mind. The clothes are covered in blood. The spot of lard or flour from cooking spreads until her clothes are tar and feather. The clothes are another body, a scaly skin, an animal covering, a fresh hip. The clothes are a burlap sack filled with wet cotton, a factory of tobacco, a winding sheet. Years later, the clothes will be the evidence neighbors use, the talk they'll whisper that children overhear and sing as taunts. That's why your mom's crazy, running through the streets and you just like her, children will say to her daughters, and the fabric will unravel again and again and again, like the long night, the lost year, the still burning mind. So I think sometimes what happens when people are dealing with, we're so much better now, thank goodness, thinking about mental health and what happens in stressful health situations. In history, we realize, man, people got it wrong all the time. And that's why I think it's encouraging for us to know that people are getting so much better now, take much better care of each other. So I'm gonna pause for a second because I've been reading for a minute and I'm not watching the time. So please, Ms. Moreland, keep me on time. So let's talk just a little bit. I know some of you guys have questions about the books. Some of you guys might just have questions about like writing, about life. I travel a lot for writing, about the awards, the prizes, that kind of stuff. So what questions do you have for me? Hey, Steve, do you need the microphone? Do we need the microphone because of the Zoom?
Favor stand up. How long did it take you for the read or writer?
This book,
Yeah.
in particular, Avery again?
Yeah.
Hey, Avery. It took a long time, Avery. Lord knows, I write so slowly. It took about 7 years, and it actually took longer than that. It took like 7 years for me to kind of get the whole stream of poems that were coming to the world. But just because of there are laws surrounding what information you can get when you're like trying to get people's health records. There are like HIPAA laws. And so I had to wait 75 years to get my grandmother's health records. So 75 years to the day, I went up to the Library of Virginia and was taken to this huge room with archives where they still have the ledgers where she was signed in to the hospital. And so that was 2016. So at the very least, I had to wait until then because I couldn't get any information to them. What a good question. I saw hands fly up, so right behind the next one. Stand up.
What inspired you to start writing poems?
What inspired me? Is that the question?
What inspired you to start writing poems?
Oh, to start writing poems. What's your name? That's a good question. Man, almost everything. I've been writing for a really long time. I had a fantastic teacher. This is all true. I wasn't set up by your teachers, I promise. I had a fantastic teacher in the 5th grade. Her name was Miss Myers, Darlene Myers. She read us a Langston Hughes poem for National Poetry Month. The poem was called Mother and Son, and it's in the voice of like his grandmother or old auntie or something. I don't know if you ever heard it, but it starts, in a voice that to me sounded like people I knew. What else can I tell you? Like for me ain't been no crystal spade. It had all these like lovely lines to it, and I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that in poems. I didn't know you could talk like the people you know. And so I wrote a poem that year in the 5th grade, and I won the district poetry contest. And it's still the only trophy I have because they don't really give trophies to people who can't run real fast. And so from then on, for me, it was, you got it, thank you, man. And so for me, it was poems from there out. That's a good question. I saw a hand in the back, and then I see another one in that row. Oh, 2 on that row. Okay, we'll just keep making our way. I see you in the back. Yes, please.
When did you first realize that you wanted poetry to be your career and you wanted to continue writing poetry books for as your career?
That's a good question. What's your name?
Avery.
Avery. Oh, Avery. All right. So when did I know I wanted it to be my career? In college. Did I know that it was still a career you could follow yet? No. I went to college and I thought, I was writing, I've been writing, like I said, since 5th grade, and I went to college and I thought, okay, well, I'll be a lawyer because that's what smart people do, right? And I hated the law. I liked arguing, but I could just do that at home with my cute sweet husband. So I figured that was kind of a waste of time because I wasn't actually into law. But I went to school for journalism and I was looking at all these different things, but then I met an actual living poet, Tim Siebels, who was a poet laureate in Virginia for a long time and taught at ODU for a long time. And I figured out there's a way for you to write poems and make that like your life's work and publish books and do all those things. And most people who do that, since poems, they don't pay a whole lot of money, most people who do that also teach. So I went and got a degree in writing and literature and also went back so that I could teach at the university, so I could teach other people about poems and about critical reading and all that good stuff. That was a good question. Next, it was like 2 people down. Yeah?
How long does it take you to write what is the average amount of time it takes to write a book?
This is real sad. What's your name?
Addie.
Addie.
That's amazing.
What is it? What is happening? Okay, so they all work together. Addie, what's my average? Addie, the truth is my average is about 7 years. Like what I just told Amy. My poetry books take a long time. It looks like I had a little blip in there. I released a memoir a few years ago, Soul Culture, that Miss Moreland has. That came out kind of 2.5 years ago. And it seems like, I was really writing fast, right? Because these books came out within 2 or 3 years of each other. But that book took 15 years. It's a book I was interviewing writers and teachers that I had that I really love, like poets that I admired for about 10 years. And those interviews turned into kind of essays about my life. And so they're there. But that was all happening all during the same time. So it takes me a long time. There's no book I've ever had that's taken less than 7 years. Yes. I have a novel that I'm working on right now. It's year 4 for me. Okay. Oh, I saw this hand way in the back and then I'm coming back up because I saw that hand before.
How many books have you made?
Oh, that's a good question. What's your name? Garrett? But not an A. I have 5. So I have 5 books that are in the world. This Room Swept Home is the most recent one. Then there's Soul Culture. Then the one before that is Starlight and Air, which is about my husband and kids. It's a bunch of love poems. And then there's 2 books before that, What We Ask of Flesh and Conversion. So I've been publishing now. This will be almost my 20th year that I've been publishing books. My first book came out in 2006. Good question. Okay. I said this hand and I see you too. Oh, I'm so sorry. Right behind you. We come to that whole road. Everybody has questions right there. How much longer do I plan to write for? Am I going to die tomorrow? No. Okay. I thought you knew something. Just kidding. What's your name? Archer. Hey, back to this. Archer, that's a good question. I plan to, seriously, writing is, the publishing, that's one thing, kind of putting books out into the world, but I write all the time, like so much more than people ever see. It's the way that I kind of process my understanding of the world. When I have questions, I go to the page and try to write them out. I don't get a whole lot of answers from the work, but it really helps me articulate like how I'm feeling. So I hope that I'll write forever. I hope I'll have that capacity because it's a thing that really helps me feel safe. It's a thing that really helps me make sense of the world and not be, so upset or so scared. So for me, it's something that I need internally, and sometimes, the work goes out into the world too. So that's great. Thank you.
What book are you most passionate
Ooh, okay, that's a really good question. Give me your name.
about? Mary Beth.
Mary Beth. I always understand. Beth. So tell me, you mean the book that I wrote that I'm most passionate about, or a book that somebody else wrote that I'm most passionate about?
Either one.
Either, because I feel like I'm a more passionate reader than I even am a writer. Like most writers are like, ooh, we talk about stuff I'm reading. Like that's the stuff that really gets me excited. My book that I'm most passionate about today is Room Swept Home because it's still so fresh. I think I don't know if this is true for every writer, but for me, You know, the book that is most recent is the book that holds your heart until the next book comes along, because you thought so much about it and worked so hard to try to, you know, make sense of things. And this one too, you know, it's really personal. It's got baby pictures in it, and, you know, stuff in there that I know I've never been able to do before. So that was exciting. The book that I'm most passionate about that I read, oh my gosh, there's so, like, seriously, that's a crazy question. Let me see, the books that I loved in the 7th grade that I go back and reread the stuff that I loved in middle school. I do that every summer because I feel like, really, this is not a put on. 7th grade was like the most important year of my life, hands down. Like, really, it kind of shifted the trajectory of everything for me. I even met my husband in the 7th grade. That's neither here nor there. It's true. It's really true. I'll tell you that story later. But Madeline Langle's A Wrinkle in Time was a book that I was reading in the 7th grade that blew everything I knew out of the water. The Giver is a book that I really loved in middle school. I heard you guys started The Giver. I still love that book so much. I also read Honey, I Love by Eloise Greenfield, first book of poems in middle school. So those are books I love. Okay, these two, because you guys have been super patient, and then we're coming to you.
Carol, those being Ellen.
Both Ellas? Okay.
Yeah, my name's Ellen. I was wondering, why did you choose to write about your relatives in your Roots Went Home and other books?
Oh, that's a good question. Ella, no one has asked me that before, and like this is probably a minute 45 on the book tour. No one has ever asked me that. I don't know if I chose to write about them. I feel like family chose me. I was telling this morning in this class, we did a Zoom. You know, I have a poem in my first book called Fish Fry, but it used to be called Why I Wasn't Invited to the Last Fish Fry. And really, it's because when I started writing these poems and publishing them, people in my family were like, oh my gosh, you're telling all of our secrets. Like, quit it, girl. And now, it's very different 20 years later. They're like, somebody call Remica, because she got to write this story down before we forget. So it's changed over time, but at the beginning, it was just like, I can't believe this crazy stuff happened in my family. I have to have a way to process it. So that's why I started writing it. But I don't think I chose. And Ella,
Who's your role model?
who? Oh man, certainly my mom. She's gonna watch this because it streams. She watches everything that I do because she's real sweet. You know, my parents have been, you know, completely widely supported. You know, if I was a goat herder, they'd be like, "Ooh, baby, you herd those goats." Like they would be so happy. You know, they don't care. Most parents might be a little nervous if you decided, listen, I'm gonna write poetry for a living, and I hope you'll pay my mortgage forever. Just kidding. But they have been supported from out of the gate. So I think my mom is kind of like my role model in real life. And my teachers, you know, I have teachers who I love. The two that come to mind, Elizabeth Alexander, who's a poet. You guys have probably seen her and heard of her, whether you know it or not. She was Barack Obama's inaugural poet. So when he, you know, was inaugurated as president, and now she runs a huge foundation, the Nolan Foundation. But I just love the way she moves in the world. And Lucille Clifton, who has passed away, is by far, hands down, my favorite poet. If you would have asked me your favorite, not book, but your favorite thing to read, your favorite poet, it would have been Lucille Clifton, for sure. Good question. Oh, I see 2 here and 2 there. You guys are doubling up on me. Okay, right here, these 2.
When was your first book made?
This Sydney?
This is Ann Sydney.
And Sydney. And when was my first book made? Like, it came out in 2006, 2007. The release date was like January 1st, so it's kind of out in between those things. But I wrote it, my first book really was written much during graduate school. When you go to school, I pursued an MFA, which is a Master of Fine Arts, which is kind of like the terminal degree if you want to be a creative writer. And what you do is you study and you read and you work with people for 2 to 3 years. And then that 3rd year, you spend the whole year kind of really trying to craft your first book. And so my dear teacher, Jason Schender, named my first book. I didn't even know what the title was. He sent back all my poems one time with conversion scrawled across the front page, and I still have that. And so that was kind of the culmination of my first book during that degree, but it came out, you know, in like 2006. Good question. Yeah. Ooh, listen. Yes, because nobody's asked me for a spoiler. They always ask what I'm working on, but I'm gonna give you some juice right now. Okay, so, because that's a good question, and I'm nosy. So I'm working on, I told you I'm working on a novel, called Sweetwater. It's my first novel. I've always been like deeply into fiction as well, but really, you know, I understand that I'm no poet. Language, especially to a fine point, is something that I think poets are filled with, kind of that lyricism. But when I finished Soul Culture, I had a big lull. Like, when you start publishing books, sometimes there are months and months and months, like 8 months, where you won't have anything else to do after you've turned in the final edits. So I said, all right, I wrote a book of prose, I see all three of them. I'm really gonna challenge myself, and I'm gonna write a novel, because when will I have the chance to do that? So I sat down and I wrote a novel, and the thing is, when you really believe you're writing something just for yourself, you don't care about anything that you put into it. So it's a love story, it's about 2 teenagers that grew up in kind of rural Virginia. The town is called Sweetwater, but I really think of it as more like Suffolk, right? It's all about like their family land and what's happening historically, how long their families held onto the land, and then trying to kind of fight for the land and keep it. So it's kind of a YA love story. She ends up bouncing around and moves to Arizona. They break them and have to get back together. There's all kinds of crazy stuff in it, and I'm telling you, I love it. I can't wait to like get to talk about, you know, love stories. And so that's the thing. Nobody knows what it's about. I haven't released anything about the novel, so now you guys know. Go, you know, tell some editors. All right, I'm coming right back to these 3 have been so patient. Put your hand up. We can start at either end. Jump in.
Okay. What made you like poetry the best compared to other book genres?
That's a good question. What's your name?
Josie Madden.
Josie. I love that it can be so concise. Like, I could write in 15 lines something that just made me really think about, oh, I never imagined, you know, that I might feel that way after that encounter. Or, you know, I never looked at one small object. You know, poets can take a tulip and you'd be like, man, I thought I knew tulips, but I love tulips, right? Like, so for me, it was really just a condensed amount of emotion and the way that you could take language. And Bruce Weigel, this brilliant poet, says, you know, make it clear, say it clearly and make it beautiful no matter what. So even the really difficult things could be made beautiful through poetry. That's why I like it.
Who is like the most interesting person in your family, and or like who do you write the most about?
Ooh, who's the most? You gonna start some fights? They gonna be like, girl, you say that I was. Okay. I don't know. You know what? Really, I don't know if there really is one person. Who do I write the most about? The truth of the matter is, I probably write the most about me, because you're working on like your own understanding of things, right? So you show up a lot in the books. You know, I think over time, I'll probably end up writing the most about my kids. And now I got a grandbaby. He is fantastic. He is in love with Michael Jackson right now, so he's probably sliding around the kitchen in socks and a glove. And so, like, that kind of fun, you can't not write about that. And so I'll probably end up writing the most about, you know, my kids and grandkids over time. Yeah, good question.
When people read your books, what message do you want them to receive, and like, what do you want them to know the most about the book?
That's a good. You know, that's a great question. I try really hard not to think about the audience when I'm writing the book, because then that'll mess you up a little bit, right? Because you're so busy worrying about whether people, you know, what they'll think, right? So you try to kind of keep that out and write things as clearly as you possibly can. Now, when they finally pick it up, you know, I tell people all the time, the book is half yours and then half everybody else's once you release the book, right? It's only yours in part anymore. And so I hope what comes through, particularly in this book, I'm writing about really hard things, but I wanted to like fill the book with beauty in as many ways as I could, and I wanted to end in joy. So I hope that's what they come to. I hope they come to understanding that, man, people are really resilient. Like the fact that we make it through all this stuff, we should be really proud of ourselves. You know, we should pat ourselves on the back more. So That's what I hope people get. Yeah.
My name is Julie. Was there ever like a point in your like writing career where you like you're gonna stop writing, like something like degraded you or something?
And something, say the last part again?
Like something like someone said something or like yeah.
Yeah, oh man, people are crazy, they write crazy stuff, even in reviews, and they don't publish it. But I don't think there was a time where I was so discouraged by what someone said that I wanted to stop writing. There have been times, I don't really believe in writer's block, because I think you can do exercises all the time, but there have been times, a good friend of mine was sent, he was in the military and was stationed where there was like active war going on in the Middle East at one point. I was stuck for a few weeks. I think just emotionally I was so overwrought with fear that I couldn't write during that time. And then, you know, sometimes people have let me tell you, when Soul Culture, when the memoir, it took me a lot of years to figure out what that book really was. But sometimes you'll have to sit out your books and you get feedback from readers, like readers' reports, and they'll say, you know, the readers' report, their job is to say, yes, I believe in this book, or no, this book needs some more work. And they're supposed to be at least fairly kind, because these are the people in your industry. And let me tell you, I got a reader's report that was so mean, like just downright, like really just tearing the word apart. It's juvenile, and this is terrible, and I can't take, and that stopped me in my tracks for a while on that book. But then I realized, you know, the tone was all wrong, but some of the points were correct, and I had to kind of find a completely different way to frame the book, and it changed everything. It helped me a great deal, but for a minute I was like, just mad, and stopped. Yeah. Good question. How we doing on time? Miss Marla, are we okay?
We've got about 10 full minutes and then a little bit of wiggle.
Okay, 10 full minutes, a little bit, we definitely have enough space for all these, so we're gonna start right here and then coming back to these two.
My name is Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Do you have like a favorite poem that either you wrote or like you've read?
Oh. I definitely have a favorite poem. I certainly did not write it. A poem that I teach at the end of every class when I'm teaching craft or poetry is a poem by Derek Walcott. It's called Love After Love. And the whole poem is about how, you know, you should be fairly kind to yourself. We beat ourselves up so much. But the poem ends with sit, feast on your life. And I just think it's a really lovely way to remind ourselves to take care of ourselves. And I think it's one of the few poems I think is a perfect poem. They're really hard to find, but that one's pretty darn good. I wish I read it. I did not.
What's the hardest time, like, when you're doing poetry?
What's the hardest time? Like just for me to while I'm in the middle of writing, or just in general?
Like, not for like writing.
The hardest time for writing. Well, the first draft always comes really easy, right? Like for me, it's kind of like a lightning strike. Like, you know, my husband can tell when I'm writing, because we'll be in the middle of the conversation, be like, that show was good. Didn't you see her? She should have been with the fireman and all of this stuff. And then I'll go dead silent. And then be like, I thought we were having a conversation, but I'll be writing on my phone, or I'll have, you know, a pen in hand and some, you know, scribbling furiously, only for about 5 minutes. So the first draft of something usually comes really quickly. And then the hard part is making that draft that you think is fantastic. Like that night, you're like, it's the best thing I ever wrote in my whole life. And then I wake up in the morning, I'll be like, it's not that great, right? Because you see it with clear eyes, even though you were passionate about it. Some spark made you write it. And so the hard part is then revising it to make it as clear as it can be for somebody who's outside of your head. That's the hard part about writing. Like, how do I make it as clear to you as it is to me? That is also the fun part. So, you know, trade-off. I'm coming back to you. I saw these two first, and I'm coming back.
So when you're like researching your family history or like researching stuff, like what do you feel when you find out stuff? Like you said, like what are you feeling when you find out stuff, like either good or bad?
Seriously, there is no exhilaration like it. I'm such a nerd in a good way though. I love being in archives. I love like discovering, you know, just really small things too, because poets aren't about like the huge thing that happens. We're about the details. So any little small detail can be like a big deal for me. one of the things that shows up in the book is that, that I then could find in the archives is that, my grandmother kind of remembered her grandmother, Minnie. She was like, I think they used to sell things at a market. And I was like, she's like, just to make ends meet, all the women in the neighborhood, I think they used to sell things at a market. And I found research in Petersburg that there's this huge market, a circular market, that was built back in the 1890s that, in fact, was used for the sale of slaves, and then eventually after emancipation, free folks would go there and sell their wares, and now it's a flea market, but it's still standing. So when I went there for the first time and found out about it, I got to go and stand in the market, and it was just like, they were here. Like, this history is like in real life now. So that kind of stuff, it excites me to know. And yes, my husband can take me to like any old dirt road, and I'll be like, look at this. So I'm very easily pleased, I think. Yeah. Well.
What's your best-selling book?
Oh, well, that's a question for my agent. That's not a question for my agent, Will. I know that answer. The answer is definitely Soul Culture, the memoir. And you know why? Because it's prose, right? So it's essays. This book, you could walk into Barnes & Noble. When it came out a few years ago, it was front and center at Barnes & Noble. It was like you could walk into any bookstore. That is generally not the case with poems. Even poems that this most recent book is from Wesleyan, a really reputable poetry press. Like, people are very impressed when I say it in rooms and stuff like that. But still, poetry's distribution is still fairly small. You still kind of have to order this book online. It'll be in a few independent bookstores. It'll be around here because they know I'm a local writer. But certainly, the book that sold the best is the book that people can see the most, and that's always going to be the memoir. And when the novel comes out, that'll knock everything out of the water because just more people read novels and other things. Good question. Parker.
How did you get people to start buying your books and get your books out to the public?
Oh, that's a good question. How did I get people to start buying my bag? A lot. The first books, the real question I think that you're asking is how do you make your way into publishing? And for poets, it's a little different. You write the whole book and then you submit to presses, and the press, usually you win a book contest, you win a book prize, and they say the prize that you win is a little bit of money, and you win copies of the book, and we'll run printings, and we'll put the book in a few stores. But mostly when you go out to readings, you get to now carry your book with you and say, if you like the poems, could you buy this book? And so you do a lot of hand-to-hand selling when you're a poet. But after I started writing prose and doing the other stuff, I had an agent that helps with a lot of that. So it comes over time. But if you're a poet and you want to write a book, you get somebody to publish it, and then there's a whole lot of please, love my work. Take it with you. There you go. Yeah.
Did you have a personal connection to the novel you're writing? When you talk about the land thing, when they're trying to get back to land and stuff, when you're giving a spoiler, do you have a personal connection to that? Or do you have that in the story about it?
That's a good question. I did not, I don't know. I don't have family land that's been taken or that we're fighting for. But we really, very little of that generational wealth has ever come our way. And that was the reason that I think I was so interested in it. I was like, man, what would happen if, we were able to hold on to something like this? And also, how does a farming family in particular, go from having land in the 1900s to now, what it looks like in 2025? It's hard to hold on to land. And, the history of the family in one space. I thought that was interesting. But there are so many other pockets in the book that are absolutely family stories, stuff that I even forget. The main character's name is Silver, and my grandmother Mary, who I write about in this book, the one who was sent to the asylum, before she passed away, she started telling me all these things about her childhood, and the boy that she loved before she married my grandfather, his name was Silver. And I thought, oh man, I love that name. I've never heard it before. If ever I write something, the character will be named Silver. So there's little pieces like that. That's a good question. I got one in the middle and one in the back. Yep.
With how many poems you've written, was it hard to transition into novels?
Yes, and I'm glad you feel my pain, for real. It was so hard, and it still continues to be hard. I'm not lying. If we walk out to my car right now, the novel is printed out in of that binder is what it feels like. It's like, man, it is hard lugging all this around because it's a completely different idea to try to take one character and maintain that character's life and emotions and personality and growth over 300 pages. It's something I love as a reader, but daggone, it's really hard. I'm kind of mad at myself for choosing to do it, but I'm gonna see it through now. That's a good question.
What's the most interesting thing you wrote about?
The most interesting thing I've written about? I don't know, I guess that depends on perspective. I do a lot of historical stuff. I write about a lot of art. Ekphrastic work is what it's called when you're writing based on art pieces, and I kind of love that. I write about like little known history facts. I got some poems about like Martin Luther King's brothers and like family that I did as a series, and all this kind of stuff. I feel like whatever is most interesting is what I'm working on right now. So it just depends. I find people like different things that they find in the work. I feel like
See, only 2:15, class ends at 2:20.
you guys.
Thanks so much. So was there one other poem you wanted to share with us, or are there any final questions?
Yeah, if there's final questions, we can do that. We don't have to end with a poem, but I can end with something short as well. So any other questions? I want you to ask me everything you want while I'm here. I'm going to get this chance again. If you see somebody, call me. It's more than if not, I'll read a poem.
Any chemistry questions over there?
Chemistry question. Please don't ask me. I won't really answer to that. Just kidding. All right. Well, I'll read a poem. Somebody asked me the other day if ever like your real life enters into poems that are about history, and the answer is yes, of course. When I was writing this, there's a whole series of sonnets. It's called a crown of sonnets, because one line, the last line of one poem becomes the first line of the next. And I was just trying to write about like what it was like being in the world with all of these women raising you, and half of that, more than half of your life, is probably just spent with somebody doing your hair. So it's a hair poem. My unruly tufts twisted into 2 French braids, and my hair is much bigger than it appears, and it always has been. So that's what the poem is about, I think. God, where you been? We asked the wide-toothed comb, the hands parting hair, strands gracing the blades and brown, swept into a mound of memory, then burned or bound. I was a bald-headed baby, but the women prayed for me. Mother bought soft brushes till one curl turned to streaming plaits, the rose trimmed with foil and marble beads, the braids lush and greased. Many days I came home wild, style lost to wind and worry, always clumsy, always dirty. I am an only child. I'm sure my mother worried what ruin would entangle me. What couldn't she gather and undo? What on earth would straightening prove? We get to meet a little bit like in person. These lights are like, I can barely see, like some of you are just shadows in the outline. So please come up and say hey before you got to run to your next class if you can. Thank you, Ms. Moreland. Again, I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your great questions and your attention. I hope you've thought a little bit about being a writer. There were several things that Remica touched on. Just that poem, if you remember reading Brown Girl Dreaming, the 7th and 8th graders, we looked at the little short film, Hair Love.
I teach hair love for college, so you guys are way ahead of me.
and the poem that Jackie Woodson writes about having her hair done with her grandmother. Remica also spoke about first drafts. We fall in love with our first drafts, but they're not the best. Okay? So, again, thank you so much for your time. It's so wonderful to be here.